Hello, everyone. I see some faces I haven't seen in a while, so welcome. I guess summer brings out the best in some of us and the worst in others. Summer's heat and energy. It actually says in some of the mystical texts that it's actually easier to serve God in the summer than the winter. I know, it's counterintuitive. The reason being is because everything in this physical world evolves from a spiritual plane. So when the sun is delivering more heat and light, that's considered to be a time of year when there's also more spiritual warmth and light. The cold is always symbolic of things going to sleep, numbness, indifference, and stuff like that. And the summer is a symbol of things being reborn, alive, vivacity, and yet that doesn't mean the summer doesn't have its challenges, because when you bring life out of people, it really depends what your interests are, which is also one of the reasons that you may know about this custom between Passover and Shavuos. Is a custom to every Shabbos to read or study the Pirkei Avot, ethics of the fathers. And then some have the custom to continue doing so throughout the entire summer, all the way till the Shabbos before Rosh Hashanah. And there are different reasons given for it. And obviously one reason is that there's 6 chapters in the ethics. So between Passover and Shavuos, as we prepare after the Exodus, after redemption, you prepare to receive the mandate, which is Sinai of Shavuos. So you prepare through studying the ethics. The expression derech eretz kodma Torah, that preceding Torah you need to be a mensch, and the ethics of the fathers basically deals with being a mensch. But there's another reason given, is because the summer is a time where people brings out more passion and more energy in people. So therefore the Pirkei Avos is a good time to, so to speak, have a guide that tempers and channels these passions and energies. Because you see, in Judaism, passion and energy and all the forces that can cause a lot of trouble and bring us trouble happen to be very holy forces. Anything with a lot of power always can go both ways. Like sexuality may be the most powerful force in existence, so it can be the force that brings life into this world. And love and intimacy, most powerful forces of a human being, needs of a human being, but they could also bring so much destruction and pain and grief. So anything of great power go both ways. There's this Talmudic statement that says, the greater the person, the greater their Yetzer Hara. The greater the person, the greater their temptations and their inclinations. Mediocre people only get into mediocre trouble, let's put it this way. Passionate people either do great things or they get into trouble as well. So, I don't know all of you, but I know some of you are free spirits, and as you roam and wander this earth, you all know your challenges, and the more the energy is active, the more it can go in both directions. It's the wise people that learn how to channel their energies. We're not talking about repressing or suppressing, talking about harnessing. That's the key, it's to harness and know how to direct things. And that's ultimately, in many ways, I think, what makes Judaism unique as opposed to other disciplines, schools of thought, where either some talk a lot about repressing or suppressing, or others talk about just doing anything you like. Judaism does not talk ever about really, even though there's discipline, and if you look at the Torah and its guidelines, there's plenty of laws and do's and don'ts, but ultimately, especially if you know the spirit of the law, it's really about harnessing our energy, not about stopping them. Because God created us the way we are. And if He didn't want us to have desires and lusts and temptations and passions and energy, He wouldn't have created energy. The fact that we have these forces inside of us means that they're powerful, they're divine. How you use them is the question. So that's a big part of Jewish thinking in almost every area of life. I recall recently, I mentioned this I think in this class more than once, speaking to a group of, they call teens at risk. It's a category today. Teens at risk. I think all teens are at risk. Frankly, all adults are at risk too, for that matter. But it's some category, fine. The Talmud says, "Kol hadrachim b'cheska sakana." All the paths are filled with danger. You know, when you travel, that's what happens. There's always dangers lurking. So, but nevertheless, this is a group of kids, boys and girls that were both. They got themselves a lot of trouble, but they were now in the so-called the rebound, upturn. Many of them were involved with drugs and abused it. Some of them almost OD. You know, a lot of trouble there. But they were all going through now some type of recovery or healing. And one of them knew me, so he said maybe I would speak to them one evening. So we had a group of 20, 25 people, and it was a very blunt and open, informal conversation. And one of the questions I posed to them, I wanted it to be a dialogue, not just a monologue. So I asked them, like, you know, how would you define the route or the point of departure where you all got yourself into trouble? You know, and what would you tell other people who are that place in their lives, a juncture? What would you say to them? And how you have the credibility, you've been through it. And it was interesting, their responses. Everyone had something else to say. This one said it was bad friends. This one said terrible home life. People they weren't giving excuses. They were just trying to identify different called culprits, the usual suspects, as they say. And I think one of them, I don't know if that was I don't think they used the word I was going to use, but one of them said something like, which was exactly what I was looking for, and I used that. Oh. Sounds like a horror movie, right? Footsteps. And the word I used was that I suggested to them, I said, what do you think about this? That the real challenge and the thing that is always the beginning of most problems is boredom, the vacuum. And as soon as I mentioned, all of them unanimously said absolutely. They didn't even think of it. The reason they didn't think of it is because vacuums are invisible till it's too late. You don't see a vacuum. A vacuum is negative energy and negative stuff you don't see. You know, you could see, like they say, in physics, they have a thing called a black hole. So a black hole, as we know today, cannot be seen. The only reason we know it's there is because we see its impact on everything around it. And it was predicted first by Einstein, then he rejected his own prediction, and then he came back to it, and it's been proven since that there are bodies of energy, there are bodies out there that the gravitational pull is so intense that it doesn't even let light escape. That's how powerful it is. So a black hole, you'd think, is being like the weakest star. The truth is, black holes are the ones with the most power. They're so powerful you can't even see them. It doesn't even let light escape. That's how powerful it is. A vacuum is where all infections fester in vacuums, where there's emptiness, where there's a void. And a person's life, it sometimes manifests in what we call boredom. So boredom sounds innocuous. It doesn't sound very dangerous, but boredom creates an environment, a breeding ground for all problems, because you're looking for a high, you're looking for some excitement or a rush. So though in itself is not per se a great powerful force, but it's the breeding ground for the most difficult things in life. And one after the other in that room, they went through their lives. They all said absolutely. It began with an emptiness, and there was nothing to fill it. So it's like someone's wandering in a desert, thirsty, and dying of thirst. So whatever someone gives you that moment to drink, you're going to drink, because you become desperate. And if it's healthy, great. If it's not, it can be poisonous, toxic, and destructive. So the most addictive personalities are the people who are the most passionate. You know, nobody ever got addicted to anything in life, set out to get addicted. Who wants to be addicted? Who wants to be mastered by something that's not in your control? It all begins with energy. Some energy, nowhere to release it, so go somewhere. Mediocrity doesn't lead usually to addictions, but passion does. and energy does. And the most creative people who don't have where to channel that energy are the ones that are most vulnerable. But the good news is that energy itself is a very powerful and even holy thing. And it's about learning how to channel it the proper way. Which leads me to the topic at hand. And that is how to maintain the spark and the sparkle. I remember when I was a kid, so I was once seeing one of these newspapers. They were covering Vietnam War, and there was a picture of a few children there in Far East Asia and Southeast Asia, to be more precise. And I remember my father was a journalist, so he'd bring home all types of newspapers, and I remember which paper it was, and I just was captivated by the image of children, running from war. I mean, I'm just using an example that I had. You could have hundreds of examples. You see it in different images of World War II, and you see in the eyes a certain shell shock of children, and that is always the most disturbing of all. Adults, not that it's easier for adults, but a child is supposed to, at least the way it should work, they should have their innocence for as long as they can keep it. Whenever you see war or devastation or any type of real trauma, the most disturbing images are where it affects children, where children's lives are prematurely aborted and the innocence is shattered. Because they don't even have that to go with. And you could see it in the eyes. And I remember looking in the eyes of that kid. I tried to retrieve that image many times. I couldn't find it. But there's plenty of images out there. And I just saw you see the eyes of a child that lost something. It doesn't have to say anything. You can just see it. And then, of course, you look into the eyes of a child that is growing up in a relatively healthy home. There's a sparkle in the eyes. And as we get older, that sparkle very often starts dimming. And that's not because of age. Because I also seen people, even 90 years old, that have the sparkle in their eye just like a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. So it's not about, certain things age we cannot control. But the sparkle of the eyes don't age. Yes, I don't mean around the eye. I don't mean the stuff you can use Botox or other stuff for. I'm talking about the actual physical eye. They weaken. Some of us are battling the battle with the reading glasses stage and stuff like that. They weaken. But a sparkle in the eye is a sparkle in the eye. And unless, God forbid, I'm not talking about a disease or anything like that, it's similar also to the mind. The Talmud says, and it's cited in Rashi, actually there's an interesting chapter in the end of the book of Leviticus, and there's a whole tractate in the Talmud about Erchin. It's one of the most complicated tractates. It talks about the value of human beings. So obviously human beings are invaluable. You can't measure life. There's no price that you can place on a life. But nevertheless, in areas of litigation or crime or damages and so on, there are certain rules. What do you do? What happens, God forbid, if somebody causes damage to another person and they're responsible? How do they repay? So they can't repay in the real terms, but there is value placed on, and one of the ways they value is age. As a matter of fact, interestingly, a man's value goes down as he gets older, a woman's value goes up as she gets older. How's that for our social state of affairs? But there's an exception. The Talmud says the following. If you look at an older man in a home, he's what they call a stumbling block. That's the word they use. He's always kvetching and complaining and stuff like that. And you look at an older woman in a home, the way the Talmud puts it, she's a simatova. She's like a pearl, a precious stone. She's helpful, and so on. And sometimes you can see this when the grandchildren are around. But there's an exception. The Talmud says like this: an ignoramus, or an illiterate person, I don't know the exact way to translate it, an Amoritz, as he gets older, his mind begins to wane. And a Talmud Chacham, a scholar, and that's the exception. even by male. Women, this doesn't apply to. By a man, if he's a scholar and has a sharp mind, the older he gets, the sharper his mind becomes. Now, I know you'll say, well, I know many men and women that don't necessarily fit the bill. So first of all, the Talmud is speaking in general terms. We're not talking about exceptions. And we're also talking about a healthy society, not a society necessarily like ours where we've put a whole different view on things. Remember, in Judaism, the idea of asking your father and grandfather is considered, because of their sage wisdom, is considered a wise thing to do. Something that we don't really look at. How much brain power is there of all these people that have retired and are waiting to die on golf courses all over the world? And their experience and their veteranship is almost dismissed because we worship youth. It's not the topic for the evening, I just make the point. Meaning that the soul never ages, and the sparkle in the eye is a sparkle from the soul. It's not a physical thing. Just like you say, Chacham Einav Bereshe. You say a wise person, his eyes are in his head, which means it's the mind. The eyes are like a window to the soul. The source of that is in Kabbalistic writing. And the eyes are also a window to the mind and to the life force inside of a person. That's why there's something that eyes reflect that nothing else can reflect. In Kabbalah, some of you are residents Kabbalists, in the Kabbalah there's in the book of Eitz Chaim, the tree of life from the Arizal, Isaac Luria, whose yahrzeit is on the 5th of Av, a few weeks ago. So in this classic work, he talks about what he calls the Adam Kadmon, sometimes referred to as the primordial human being. Essentially, it's a spiritual entity in which we were created in its image. It's like the way the divine manifests in a structure. So the human structure that is our lives, our bodies, is a mirror image of a divine structure. And it talks a lot about this aspect of what comes, the eyes of this entity, the ears, the nose, the different, we call them the different canals that allow us to look inside and peer inside of a human being. So when you look inside someone's ear, yes, ears have the power to hear. Or the nose, the power to smell. These are fragrance. And these are all powerful forces, each with their own qualities and virtues. But as the eyes are the only things that you can look at and actually see something. You can see a mood. You can see a mood change. If you're a good reader of eyes, you can see a lot more than anyone can imagine. Obviously, there are people who learned the trick of putting on, as I discussed a few weeks ago, different masks. And when you've developed very sophisticated defense mechanisms, you can also put on different, fake different looks. You can smile when you're really angry, and you can do other things. But the eyes don't lie to a person who's a trained person. The eyes have a way of showing something that's much deeper from within us. So this sparkle that you see in young children, which is natural to them, now what happens to it and where does it go? The reason I chose to talk about this topic is several reasons, but besides the fact that often the topics I address here are topics that I really hear from you, whether it's you sitting in this room or people online or the emails or other. I'm in constant contact with human beings, and much of what I teach and communicate about is really about what I interact with human beings, taking the pulse of the human condition. There's enough Torah that's taught that doesn't take into account human beings. You can sit and learn a parsha of the week. You can learn a piece of Talmud. I just had now finished 90,000 people at MetLife Stadium, beautiful event, gathering together. But like someone said to me, he was there, he said to me, I've been studying the Talmud, but the one thing that's missing is I don't see its relevance. It's beautiful to see us all studying a text that goes back 1,500 years. But the message, what's its relevance? And he was wondering how come none of the rabbis talked about the relevance of the Talmud. It was all like a given. It's God's Talmud, we've been studying it for so many years, and it's beautiful. There's no doubt about that. But the relevance is, of course, a much bigger challenge, which is why there's only 92,000 people, not 900 million people, and so on. And the relevance is the spirit within it all. So you can study Torah and it should be detached of the human experience, the human condition. one of the big challenges of our time is exactly that. How do you make it relevant? But not how you make it relevant. The Torah was given for it to be a relevant blueprint in the first place. The word Torah itself comes from the root hira. Hira means directive, guide. Another root for the word Torah is also from the word light. Torah comes from the word light. Torah is like light. In Aramaic, the word for Torah is eraisa. Eraisa. In Zohar, the Talmud, eraisa is used. Eraisa, the Zohar says, is made up of two words. It means transmitting light or conveying light. Or yaisa. In Aramaic, yaisa means to carry, to draw, to transmit. And light. So this is an interesting interpretation for what most people would define Torah, Bible, book of laws, book of mitzvahs. To call it a guidebook, a book of directive, a book of light, compels us and provokes us to understand what is this meaning. And the answer is very simple. What is the nature of light? It's interesting. You can have a room, everything is intact, but if the lights are out, everything is there. When you turn on the light, nothing changes. Not one thing changes in the room. I'm not talking about on a subatomic level. On a physical level, to the naked eye, nothing changes. However, it could be the difference between life and death. If it's in a dark room, you don't know where the objects are. You can bump into and you can use them for the wrong things, and so on. Fall down steps, God forbid. You turn on the light, everything is there, but now you know what it looks like, and you know what its function is. A table is a table, a chair is a chair, steps are steps, a pit is a pit, a ladder is a ladder, etc., etc. So it's like driving dark roads without headlights. That would be the equivalent of life without a guidebook. So another way to put it, the Torah itself describes itself as a blueprint. As a blueprint for life. Using the example of an architect follows a blueprint, so the Torah too is a blueprint. Or to use more contemporary language, think of it as an operator's manual for life. So you come home with a new gadget, a new computer, or new this or that, BlackBerry, Blueberry, or that's phasing out, I know, so whatever it is. So then you come home, there's always in the box, even if there's always a little booklet that comes with it. Now, I know some people hate reading these booklets, and some people love it. Talk about boredom. A person tells me, I like to buy gadgets because I love reading these booklets. It occupies 3 days of my week. I'm busy reading, the how to, not that he needs to know it, but it's just intriguing. I know how many of us like to read warranties and mortgage contracts. It's equivalent, but some people like it. I had a guy I once worked with who was brilliant, book smart, but didn't have one drop of imagination. Literally, I mean that literally. And what would he do for leisure? I watched him. He would read a dictionary. Literally, he'd read a dictionary for hours. Now, it's sometimes intriguing to look at a dictionary, you find words, but how many hours can you spend reading a dictionary? But some people, so everybody's got their so-called quirks. They've got their stuff. I'm not saying it critically. Certain minds, I guess, work that way. But what would be a machine, sophisticated, man-made machine, without knowing how to use it? You could have exactly the same machine. You press the wrong buttons, you can destroy the machine. You can destroy a lot of things. You press the right button. So it's about a light. What a guidebook is a light. It shines a light given to us by the one who engineered or crafted and built this machine, telling you, here's how you work, here's how you use this machine to its best. It's exactly what the Torah is. Torah based on the axiom that life is not here by accident, but it's by design, and that God, the architect, placed it here. He's the cosmic engineer. This big machine called life and existence comes with an operator's manual, and it tells you, here's what the things that will make this machine work better, and here's the things that won't make it work well. It's as simple as that. It's the entire Torah, standing on one foot. I know Hillel said something else, I don't want to compete with that. But so the Torah is essentially that type of guidebook. So years ago when this class began, to me, there was really a few people coming to see me who wanted to get some spiritual inspiration from Jewish sources. And to me, it was immediately obvious they don't need me. You want to read a Parsha class? There are plenty Parsha classes, Talmud classes, Jewish law, Jewish philosophy. To me, always the challenge was the same one. How do you make it come alive and make it relevant? I'll use even a stronger word, indispensable. Because if you can't achieve that, you could say a nice thought, but it's optional, dispensable. It has to be indispensable for anyone to want to commit to it and be involved in it. And to me, that was always the challenge, and I've always stuck to that challenge. I know it makes it more difficult, because then you have to really deliver. And I can't say I've always delivered, but I try at least. To me, this is the question that each of us always should ask. No problem, no matter where you go, what class you take, whatever rabbi you speak, whatever conversation you have, who cares? Who cares that 2,000-3,000 years ago the Jews left a country called Egypt, which we don't that we haven't, most of us have never seen, and so on. Why do we have to recreate these things? Passover, whether it's Shavuos coming soon, the high holidays. What is the relevance of it all? So yes, you can get away with a nostalgic answer and a cultural one, and saying this is what Jews have been doing, this is what keeps us together. It has. Look, for some people that may work, but you know something? For most people it doesn't. The proof is in the pudding. 80%, I don't know exact numbers, of Jews today are not affiliated. So clearly it's not working for them. And then those that are they doing it with passion and vitality, or is it mechanical, by rote? They grew up with it. I'm not taking away good routines and habits are beautiful, but a routine and a habit does not lend itself to something that's going to have perpetuation. It's hard for me to imagine, and these are questions I asked when I was a teenager, a skeptical teenager. Now I'm a skeptical adult, but then I was a skeptical teenager. That I said to myself, so one second, for thousands of years Jews were just following by rote, mechanically, whatever they were told. Every Jew I met doesn't do anything he's told. So where does conformity come from? And I came to the conclusion after my own exploration and soul searching and looking in the sources above all. So I wanted to see, what does it say? The Jews are people of the book. We have books. It's not hearsay. You don't have to hear what someone said about something that happened 1,000 years ago. They're books. They're documented. We have authors that wrote books 1,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago, 2,000 years ago. Then it wasn't books. Then it was on scrolls or on tablets or the Talmud or whatever it may be. So to me, it was a life. It was actually, for me, it was spiritual life and death to understand where is the Judaism, because I couldn't accept that it was just a system of mind control. I could accept it, but if it was that the case, I was not going to subscribe to it. And it was hard for me to imagine that pioneers and revolutionaries like Moses and Abraham and Mordechai and down the line, Rabbi Akiva and so on, were just plain following somebody's guidelines. They weren't. They were deeply challenged. It didn't come easy at all. They paid heavy prices for it. And then I discovered something which is the best kept secret, that the Torah is exactly that. It's an operator's manual. It's not about just do's and don'ts, a book of laws. It's a deeply spiritual and psychological book, and divine in nature. I'm not here to make a case to prove it's divine or not. For me, the proof in these type of things is what we call experiential. Tamru kitev Hashem, as they say. Taste it. Just like someone would ask me, how do I know that music is healing or music is uplifting? I can't prove it scientifically. Just if you were asked such a question and someone says, okay, I'll hook you up to a bunch of monitors and sensors, and we'll see your blood pressure goes up when you hear music, and these different neurons begin charging your brain, and they say, oh, now I got mathematical scientific proof that music touches me. It's a lot easier to just listen to it and see if it touches you or not, and that's that. Now, I know emotions can be manipulated, but when you study it, and you study it with a sober mind and a skeptical mind and heart, and you start realizing and you start seeing, yes, how does the Torah know about this part of my spirit or soul? And you start seeing this profound dimensions of the psyche and the unconscious and how it plays itself out, and understand the whole spirit of it, then it becomes indispensable. And when we say in the evening prayer that Torah is chayenu v'erech yameinu, it's our life and our sustenance, it's a nice statement people make all the time, and we say it in the prayer, but what does it mean? Life and sustenance? Most people, you ask them their life and sustenance, they'll say it's bread and water, or whatever it is that we eat and drink. and it's the money I make, and the other things that I value. And look what people do on a daily basis. What do they do for life and sustenance? So it's true, Rabbi Akiva told the skeptic and said, why are you so committed to studying Torah? And you don't miss a day studying. And he gave the example of the fish in the water, that a fish leaves water, it will die. Same with Torah is water for a Jewish soul. It's a beautiful analogy, but how many people can explain why it's water? And if it's water, why there's so many people who not necessarily feel they have to drink it? And even those that do drink it, are they doing it because of they really feel that it's water to their soul, or is it a cultural thing? And I'm not trying to be difficult or play devil's advocate, but these questions have to be stated because many of us think about it without saying it. So I'm stating it here right for the record. And my answer is, many people are afraid to ask this question because they think there's no answer. The answer is absolutely, it's water if you understand the soul and spirit of it. So with that being said, the challenge in any situation, any parsha, any story, any episode in Jewish life and Jewish history, tradition, the mitzvahs, the narrative, the question always is, what is its relevance? How is this a blueprint for my life? How is this an indispensable light that can illuminate the dark paths that we all travel on? We don't know what's coming tomorrow. When we have questions like, where am I going to find love in my life? Where will I find a soulmate? The big questions. The questions that you can't just go out and say, okay, I'm going to go to this hardware store or this mall or online, and I'm going to find answers. The questions about truth, about God, about soul, about happiness, about love. This is exactly what the Torah came to do, was to help a person illuminate the darker crevices, the areas that are more complicated, that are not so simple. Yes, if you don't have to go out to New York to where to buy a drink or something like that, most of us are pretty easy, adept to do that. But when you talk about spiritual sustenance for our souls, for our psyches, where do we turn to? So of course the first step when anyone has any challenges is the thing called professor denial. That's where we turn to, which is, we ignore it as long as we can. When that doesn't work, so we begin searching. The therapeutic industry, I don't know, is it billions of dollars, is it trillions of dollars? I don't even know if anyone knows. But therapy has become a conventional thing. Most people have a therapist. We call it a counselor, life coaches, mentors. The list goes on. And these are basically just demonstrating that people have a need. Now, how much these systems work or don't work is another story. But they're out there. How many people open up a Torah to look for those type of issues? Even people who study Torah every day, who stand by, hear the parsha on Shabbos and don't miss a word, and even help correct the reader of the Torah. I don't know if you ever saw that phenomenon. People who study Daf Yomi, people who study Torah and are dedicated, committed. If they have a psychological issue, what will they open up? Will they open up a Torah? Most don't know how to read it in that way. They'll say, how am I supposed to read this week's chapter? Will tell me about events that happened back then when the Jews were in the wilderness. It may have a few mitzvahs, and there may be some inspirational thoughts, and you have a Dvar Torah here and there. But to say that every word has a personal message for me right now, this is there's a big we'll call it, what's the word, dissonance, split between the Torah as being life and sustenance in our lives. So I began the discussion about the spark and the sparkle. And most people would say, well, I can't believe that the Torah talks about that, because the Torah is usually not so cool, let's put it that way. It doesn't talk about the sparkle in the eyes of a human being. Well, we can all stand corrected if that's what we think. So I want to refer you to a verse in this week's chapter. This week's chapter is a verse that is very well known, but let's read it slowly. It says like this. Ki lo yal alechem levad yichya adam. Not on bread alone does a human being live. Ki im al moitze pi Hashem yichya adam. Rather, on the moitze pi Hashem, which can be translated the expression of God within the bread, or the spark of the divine in the bread, is upon which a human being lives. As I said, this is used, it's a pretty famous verse. But this verse is analyzed by the Arizal. I mentioned earlier, Isaac Lurie, the great Kabbalist, in the most profound and simple and relevant way. And he actually asks a question. He cites philosophers. This is in his commentary on this chapter. The Arizal didn't write most of his teachings. They are written primarily by his great student, Reb Chaim Vital. And there are many. I mentioned the Eitz Chaim, which is more like the map, the cosmic map. But there are other books, many books. There may be 30 volumes, maybe more, of the Arizal's writings. They're called Kisra Arizal, really writings of his teachings, basically. And there's a book called Shara Psukim, The Gate of Verses. There's a book called Likutei Torah. There's a Sefer Likutim. These are all books that are commentary on the Parsha. Like the Zohar, which is the classic work of Kabbalah, that goes back almost 2,000 years. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is also structured around the Torah, the chapters of the Torah. And he's citing the issue of this verse. He cites, as I said, some different thinkers that ask the question, why is it that we human beings are dependent on other elements for our own sustenance? The amoeba, and there are other, small, minute creatures that sustain themselves. They don't need to consume anything outside of themselves. We human beings, like the animal kingdom, cannot live just on oxygen or just on regenerating our own cells. We need to consume something and turn it into energy. Whether it's mineral, vegetable, or animal, that's what we do. We consume. And he has the liberty to ask the question, why did God make it that way? Why would God make it that one creature should be dependent on killing another or consuming another for its own sustenance? And the answer he gives, based on this verse, and I'll explain it more in depth in a few minutes, is that because God created the universe in a symbiotic way. You can consider it consuming other creatures, or you can consider it uniting with other creatures. Based on the principle, which really did not become popular until Einstein and the last century, but this has always been common knowledge in Torah thought, especially in mystical teachings, that matter and energy are reversible. And there's nothing in this earth that disappears. Everything is on its way somewhere else. You see a tree fall off, an apple fall off a tree. You see it starting to degenerate, to deteriorate. It will be consumed, all its minerals will be consumed in the earth and will serve as nutrients, and its seeds may give birth to another tree, an apple tree. There's no such thing as something dying in the conventional sense. Things turn from one form to another. In the natural world, it's definitely that way. Human beings, because we maybe think more than we should, we wonder whether we do. But today it's a common knowledge. E equals mc squared means energy equals matter. With the proper speed of light and the proper heating or the proper speed, energy and matter are interchangeable. The classic example is you take water crystals, and if you regular temperature, it's water, liquid. You heat it, it becomes gas. You freeze it, it becomes ice. It's exactly the same water. So even though we don't see the gas or the vapor, and it dissipates, it's exactly the same water. It just now become a different form. The same is true with everything in existence. So the Arizal says, and I'm elaborating, it doesn't say it in every detail, but it basically says, when you consume a piece of food, what you're basically doing is turning one item from one form into another, energy. You're taking matter and turning it into energy. The question is, what are you going to do with this energy? And that's the big question. So from a Torah point of view, the question is not just what right do we have to kill an animal for our own consumption. We also have the same question, what right do you have to kill a vegetable or a mineral? Now I know some of you say, one second, we're not killing a vegetable or mineral. We don't call that killing. There's no blood being shed, but how do you know? Vegetables have maybe their own social life. Who knows what they have? We don't relate to it. And same with minerals. What right do we have to destroy another form of life, whether we relate to it or whether we have the power is not relevant here, for our own needs? That's really the question. As a matter of fact, in Jewish law, Bal Tashchis is an actual grave sin. Bal Tashchis means that you're not allowed to destroy something for no reason. Not a tree, not a mineral, nothing, not a stone. Because the world is a sacred place created by God and it has all divine, it's a divine part of the divine plan. One of the Rebbes, when he was a young child, he was taking a walk with his father. And while they were walking in a field, in a garden. The child, nonchalantly and as we always usually do inadvertently, just tore off a leaf from a tree without even thinking and began to rub it. Till like that. His father saw that and he reprimanded him and said to him, "What right do you have? This leaf was put there by someone. And it's part of a bigger plan that you and I may not understand. But what right did you have to just tear it off and just rub it?" And this Rebbe later, when he grew up, explained how that was a lesson to him in life. Because imagine if your attitude to that way, the sensitivity to a leaf, imagine the sensitivity to other human beings. Just imagine that mindset altogether, that 24/7 you think, every time you walk, every time you talk, every time you encounter someone. It's a sacred moment. What are you doing with this moment? Are you destroying something, or are you building something? So what right do we have all of that? That's the big question. As I said, the big question, why did God make it that way? It's like no choice. You could say, okay, I'll choose to be a vegetarian. Fine. Vegan, whatever it may be. But you need to eat something. If you're not going to consume any mineral or any vegetable, you're not going to be able to survive. So why would God force us to have to consume something else or destroy something else in order to? So the answer is based on the Mishnah and also the Medrash. It talks about, Mishnah asks, why was in the creation, you have the 6 days of creation, first day let there be light, and the 6th day, which is when we celebrate Rosh Hashanah, the 6th day, the anniversary of the creation of the human being, Adam and Eve. So it says that Adam and Eve were created last. So the Mishnah asked the question in Sanhedrin, asked the question, why was the human being, the crown jewel of creation, created last? If it's like the ultimate purpose, should have been created first. And the Mishnah gives two seemingly contradictory answers. The first answer is because when you invite a special guest to the table, you don't first invite the guest and then set the table. First you set the table, then you invite the guest. Do you agree with that? So God first created to set the table, set the whole world in motion, and then brought the special guest. The second answer says that if a person transgresses, he should be told, don't think you're so special. Even the lowly insect, yitush, even a yitush, kadmacha, even a lowly insect was created before you. So which are we, the special guest or even lower than an insect? The answer is, it depends how you behave. There's a Hasidic aphorism saying that when a wicked person walks on the street, the cobblestones cry out, what right do you have to walk on me? We didn't transgress, the stones say. What right do you have to use your wicked feet to walk on us to do something that is hurtful to others, using us as an instrument? So we really have three choices in every encounter in life. You walk by on a hot, warm day, and you see a very juicy apple tree. If you like plums, you could use the word plum, or peach, whatever it is that you. And the apple is there, like talking to you and saying, "Hey, this may be very refreshing." So you have three choices. You could either ignore it, or you can just grab the apple off the tree and just bite into it and indulge yourself, and then the energy use it for hurting somebody else. Or you can take the apple and consider being sensitive, make a blessing, and before you eat it with a little trepidation, and with the intention of using the energy to help somebody. So if you use the energy to hurt someone, the apple has a very big complaint against you. What right did you have to take me off a tree where I wasn't hurting anyone and now made me part of your energy that's hurtful? And if you eat the apple and you use the strength and energy for something positive, the apple thanks you Because as long as I would be on the tree, I would never be able to help anyone else. I would always remain there. I wouldn't hurt. I'd be part of the natural balance of things. But thank you, because now I've become a partner in making the world a better place. And that is, in a nutshell, what the Arizal says. And that's what the verse is saying. Not on bread alone do we live, but on the spark of the divine that is within the bread. That means that don't think that the bread is what gives you life, it's the spark. It's the purpose that lies in the bread, which is for you to release that spark, make it part of your energy, take that piece of matter, turn it into energy, and use it for some divine and sacred purpose. And this is just an example with bread. The truth is, everything in existence has a spark in it. This is the concept in the Kabbalah of redeeming the sparks, elevating the sparks. But I want to go a step further. The word is nitzutz. The nitzutz in Hebrew means a spark. What is a spark like? So if you look at a flame, a campfire, or you light any type of torch, it says it's releasing sparks. So usually if you shake the torch or you strike it, so you'll see the sparks that fly off the torch. This is used as an example in Kabbalah and Chassidus for the divine sparks, which means like this. And indulge me, bear with me as we go a little journey here. When we look at existence from the outside in, which means right now with our naked eyes, so here you see a room with tables and chairs and people. Look out the window, you'll see all kinds of different things. You don't see the energy within anything. You may understand there's energy, and we know that we're tapping into it. You get on a cell phone, even if you don't think about it, your cell phone is, how is it working? Because there's energy. There are waves, there are air waves, there are sound waves, there are light waves. Most waves are invisible, but they're all over the place. All technologies testify to that. But we still, with the naked eye, only see the outer dimension. The Torah tries to train a person to start looking from the inside out, to see everything is really potential energy waiting to be released. And a simple example would be, think of a good, aggressive business person, someone who owns a business. So one of the things I'll tell you is 24/7, they're thinking where they can find another opportunity. They go to a party that has nothing to do with their business. They're constantly busy spanning the room, networking, connecting, trying to find opportunities. They're looking for sparks. But those sparks happen to be for their own personal gain, whatever that business may be. A Torah person is doing exactly the same thing. Wherever they go, they're scanning and spanning the rooms, always looking for the spiritual sparks that are waiting to be released. However, we see things from the outside in. We think in terms of what is in it for me, what's the immediate gain, instant gratification, whatever it is that's distracting us at that moment. In the Shema we say, don't follow your eyes. You walk down the street, your eyes wander. So, on a simple level, it means don't get tempted and seduced by everything you see. But on a deeper level, it means don't get distracted by the externals of everything. One prayer that we say several times a day, we cover our eyes. Shema. Why do we cover our eyes? You ever think about it? We cover our eyes because we're making a statement in this prayer. It says Shema Yisrael, Hear O Israel. And the end of the statement is that God is one. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. For the full definition of this prayer, what does it mean? It means the most famous prayer of all. But if you think about it, what does the prayer mean? What is it saying even? What is the point of it? Why is it such a significant prayer? We say it every day. In the high point of Yom Kippur, Shema. Jews said it on their deathbed, say it on their deathbeds. It's like the ultimate declaration of the Jew. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. So first of all, what's the redundancy? Hashem Elokeinu. You could say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Echad. I know it's a short prayer, but it could even be shorter. So we say Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad 3 times. Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. What's missing if you just said Shema Yisrael, Hashem Echad? And also on Yom Kippur, when we say it, right afterwards, we say Baruch Hashem, and then we say 7 times, similar expression, Hashem Hu Elokim, 7 times. Now if you look in all the siddhers, and I've done this research, so I can tell you, there's all kinds of translations for Hashem Elokim or Hashem Elokeinu. God is our Lord, Lord is our God, God is our God, Lord is our Lord. You could choose which one you want. To me, they all mean nothing. What do they say? What does this mean? What kind of redundancy is this? And if you want to go further, take every blessing we make. The same redundancy. Baruch atah. What did we say afterwards? Hashem Elokeinu. God, our God. And then Melech HaOlam, King of the universe. What's the point? Just looking for poetic words? There are Bible critics that determined that the Bible has several authors because one of the proofs of it, because you have different names of God in different places. So it must be each author, author A, there's author A, author B, author C. Each one used their personal preference for God. So there's Hashem, there's Elokim, there's Kael, there's Adonai, there's this one, that one. Well, just for anyone that knows a little Hebrew, knows these are not different names. They're not the same names. Each one has a different meaning. Hashem means the God of compassion. Elokim is the God of justice. But more specifically, Elokim is the gematria of Hateva, of nature. So there's two dimensions of the divine. One is called the God of nature. Call it in the Kabbalistic or Hasidic terminology, it's called Mamala Kalam. It means the God that manifests within existence. And then there's the transcendent dimension of the divine, that's beyond existence. The declaration we make, Hashem Elokeinu, or Hashem Elokim, is saying that the transcendent and the immanent are one. And that in itself is a revolutionary philosophical approach, which you do not find in most systems. There is pantheism of Baruch Spinoza, which is basically God is nature, nature is God. So that's God is nature, nature is God. That's it. There's, especially Far Eastern disciplines, talk a lot about the transcendence of the divine. They may not use the word divine, the transcendence of the light. And the immanence, so to speak, that which we relate to in this world is mostly an illusion. And in Judaism, chooses the most difficult approach, the paradoxical one, which is that God is within, but also beyond. That means, in simple language, it means that the divine experience is not just through climbing a mountain and escaping from the trappings of the material, natural world and all its parameters, but through its parameters, you can reach the transcendent. The transcendent and the immanent are one. The God that's beyond it all has also implanted himself, embedded himself in the DNA of existence. This is discussed at length in the discourse that I've been teaching, which you can see on YouTube, and it's on Ayin Beis. 100 years ago, this epic of Hasidic discourses was delivered by the Rebbe Rashab. Unbelievable stuff. I've talked about it somewhat in the previous classes. But this is a key theme, how the transcendent and the immanent join together. Here's not the place to discuss in all full detail, but it comes down to this. That when we make a blessing, or the Shema, we're basically making the statement that you can reach the beyond while you're here. You don't need to leave this earth. You don't need to leave to be a free spirit. You don't need to escape from the responsibilities of day-to-day life. But within day-to-day life, if you know how to tap into it, you can discover the complete infinite. Because God is neither infinite nor finite, therefore both can be fused together. And this is the classic meaning in all the blessings, in the Shema, in the Yom Kippur prayers, wherever you go, this is what Hashem Elokeinu means. That's why it's so important to declare it. So going back to the Shema, so we say, Hear, O Israel, the transcendent Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. What is the continuation? That it's all one. The transcendent and the immanent are one. We can't split it into two. There are no two gods. There's no one God that you experience when you go to Yom Kippur or synagogue, another one you experience on a Wednesday night in the streets of Manhattan. God cannot be split into two, because monotheism is not the meaning that there's only one God and not many, not a plurality or duality. It means there's one reality and not many. And it's one divine reality, one field of energy that just looks to us as distinct. So there are truly different levels, but within it all there's a thread that connects them all. That's Hashem Echad. But because we're so distracted, and we're so seduced, and we are so superficial, and our eyes and our senses give us a different picture of existence, so when you say Shema, close your eyes. It really is trying to say to shut down your senses. Because when you look with your eyes, you see a world that's seemingly fragmented. You don't see the connection between things. You don't see energy. Only till 100 years ago, scientists would not have known that the world was made up of just a few particles that define everything. They're looking for the unified field theory. But it's come down to basically two systems, on a quantum level and on a macrocosmic level, or the four forces as they call it. Electromagnetism, gravity, the strong force and the weak force. And they're looking for the unifying. But once upon a time, it seemed like all kinds of multitude of millions of different forces. Look at the human body. There's 75 trillion cells in your body. I said trillion. I said it's the only thing that's higher than the United States debt. The amount of cells. But we're catching up. And how do they function? They function like one unit in a healthy body. It's a miracle. Diversity, as diverse as it gets, but it's united. That's like a Hashem Elokim thing. There's the Elokim part, which is plural. Many different components, many different pieces. But there's the one transcendent force that unites it all. So our prayers, our blessings, are actually stating the obvious. Look at nature, the same thing with nature. Now our eyes, our senses, deceive us into thinking that it's a bunch of pieces. So we cover our eyes when we say the Shema. So which brings me back to the search for the sparks. And the sparkle, for that matter. Children have the spark in their eyes because they have the spark of the divine is very obvious to them. They've not yet been jaded. They've not yet been programmed to be, and that their senses distract them into thinking it's a fragmented universe. Children have a sense of some higher sense of reality. They don't have necessarily the philosophy behind it, and they can't articulate it. But the sparkle is in direct proportion to how closely you see this divine energy within all of existence. That's the formula. I'll elaborate. But that's what it comes down to. People who have that type of seamlessness have that energy inside of them. You're in touch with your own energy, you're in touch with the energy around the existence. The more you worship, and the more you become part of the static, inanimate, what's the word I want to say, almost dead universe, the more you lose the sparkle in your eyes. God forbid when a person dies, maybe after 120 years, there's nothing in their eyes. Just left is the physical eye. Because the soul is gone, the spirit is gone. So you'll just see glass eyes. So there you go. The spirit is the sparkle. People who are in touch with that soul in a conscious and active way have that type of gregariousness and vitality all the time. Because it's coming from the engines within them. People who occupy most of their time with what others think about them, or trying to play by the rules of this material world, and valuing all the things that are fundamentally dead, it deadens that individual as well. So we really have, as it says in the Torah, next week's chapter, look, behold, I present for you today two paths, the path of life and the path of death. And I remember years ago, a person at this class, it was the week of Re'eh, it was next week's chapter, and he went to yeshiva. He was extremely disturbed by that verse. And he said to me, you explain to me this verse in a way that I can relate to, and you'll change my life. That's the way he challenged me, which he was so sure that I couldn't. because he didn't know that I'm good. I rise to challenges. I like challenges. So I thought about it. And I went back to read the verse, which I read my whole life. I went to yeshiva. And it became very obvious to me. What is the meaning? Because, the meaning also can be a very big turnoff for someone who doesn't really relate to the Torah. What does it mean? So what's God like threatening us? And saying, if you follow my rules, you live. And if you don't, you're going to die. That's basically how it's read. It's not at all the meaning of the verse. It's basically saying that you have a choice. Are you going to embrace and value that which is dead in this world? Then you kill yourself. And if you're going to embrace that which is alive in this world, then you bring yourself to life. And you shall cleave to God, the source of life, and that's how you live. Where does life come from? Now, how do you define life? Now, we usually don't think about it much. We take it for granted. You wake up in the morning, hey, another day, the life force is within me, now I figure out what I'm going to do today. Well, in Jewish tradition, you're told that you wake up in the morning, before you jump anywhere, why don't you acknowledge the life that was just given to you? Moidani, lefanecha melechai v'kayim, shachzata b'nishmasi, b'chem l'rabba amunasecha, which means I acknowledge you for returning my soul to me. So just have enough decency, at least, to thank and recognize, acknowledge that you have a life force inside of you, and not everybody has a life force inside of them. But we take it for granted. Why? Because it happens every morning. Why shouldn't we? It's like we think we're entitled to it. Right there, you have the first problem. This is, we call sometimes the language, either you have bittul, self-worship, self-centered, or God-centered. What is the focus of your life? We live in a material world, and we worship this material world. I could say that across the board. Maybe some of you think you don't. Maybe you don't call it worshiping. I understand. You may not bow down to the material world like this. But we worship it in many ways. It's what we value. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai told his great students, so don't feel so bad, I mentioned this, he said, Halavai, on his deathbed, he said to his students, Halavai, may it be, that you should fear God as much as you fear other human beings. This is Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, one of the greatest sages, speaking to his students who are great sages, and telling them this basic little principle. We fear others more than we fear God. Why? Because God is invisible. It requires faith. It's easy to deny. Whereas other people are right there in the room. That's a deterrent. For some, even that's not a deterrent, but that's another story. But it's a deterrent. Shame, pride, humiliation. People don't want to be exposed. So there are a lot of things we do which we maybe would do a lot differently if we wouldn't be caught. I know it's almost demeaning to think of ourselves this way, but hey, that's human beings. And everybody knows in their own heart what kind of, how low we can stoop when it comes to just making ourselves look good. Why is it so valuable to us? Because we live in a material world where God deliberately and intentionally, premeditated, created an agnostic universe, a universe that conceals its source and it conceals the life force within. Period. That's a given. What the Arizal and all the great Kabbalists and the great teachers came to teach us is don't be deceived by the masquerade. God's masquerade. So God is a great chameleon, masquerader, concealed the divine energy within. I was just reading a review last week, the New York Times book review, a book about the Jewish physics of Einstein. I don't know if any of you saw this. So I didn't see the book, I only saw the review. And the author makes the case that not so much, it's interesting, he says not necessarily that Jewish ideas is what spawned the ideas of Einstein, but Jewish thinking is what spawned Einstein's way of thinking. And there's no question in my mind that's correct. Because it's only someone that enters into the world of energy that is not deceived by the regular rules of existence that could come up with such out-of-the-box ideas. Every out-of-the-box idea means somebody did not allow the conventional wisdom affect them. We all do. We are conformists, whether we like it or not. I've already tried this experiment, so I don't try it anymore, asking if any conformists in the room. So I've asked this to thousands of people. So I can report to you that there's 7 billion people on earth that don't think they're conformists. Who wants to call themselves a conformist? But Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai told his own students that you are conformists. And it's not that easy to access this energy within. But that's why we Jews have a thing called making a blessing on a piece of food. It's much more than just thanking God for giving you something to sustain you. It's essentially the sensitivity to realize that energy drives this universe and not matter does. And that's exactly the words, not on bread alone. It's on the spark within. And then when you get more in touch and live a life of that type of an energy level, you become a sparkling individual. And people will respond to you that way as well. I don't care what best-selling books or all kinds of tricks of the trade of how to influence people. Carnegie wrote that famous book. The thing that influences people more than anything is when you have a spark in you and you give off life. When you're a dynamic individual. And this dynamic doesn't mean aggressive and charismatic. That some people have, and they use it for whatever good purposes, not such good purpose. I'm talking about a spirit that shines through you. People are attracted to spark. You have a dark street, and you're walking down the street. What are you going to be drawn to? Wherever there's light. Light draws people. Darkness repels people. So we talk about joy. You want to be around someone that's a happy person or someone that's despondent? What will be your choice? If you come into a room, I'm talking about all things equal, not someone that you don't know anyone. The only person you know are the people that are depressed. Then obviously, that's a choice between your comfort zone and so on. But let's say you don't know anyone. Who are you drawn to? The person who's welcoming. The one person who has the spark. The secret of the spark is not just something you can press a button. It's people who are in touch with the soul of existence. Now I know someone can argue one second. I know a lot of people are very non-spiritual and they have that sparkle. First of all, let's see how long it lasts. I'm not talking about for a day or two. Obviously, when you're talking about young people, almost everybody's got the sparkle. I'm talking, start climbing the years, and that's not necessarily the case. And above all, it's not just about, as I said before, children by nature have it. And therefore teenagers by nature have it. Until the point where they begin to really become part of the problem instead of part of the solution. You know what I'm saying? So, basically it comes down to what we value and what we ultimately worship. Now, all of us have to contend with the material world, and I'm not suggesting you can suddenly free yourself of that. That's why only the Shema they tell us to cover our eyes. Because the Torah is realistic. If I told you to cover your eyes the whole davening, you probably wouldn't end up doing it. So once a day or a few times a day when you say the Shema, it reminds you, don't remember there's another reality beyond what you see. But what can be expected of us is to change the course. Meaning that to change the course of our lives. So I'm not suggesting some cold turkey thing that suddenly no longer living on the container level, you're going to live on the spark, on the energy level. But you can change the course of your life. Are you going this way? You're going that way. In other words, are you becoming more and more resigned and more trapped by the material realities? Or are you beginning to go the other direction? And that's what I tell you, that tonight you can change the course of your life. Because the soul is always in there waiting. The sparks are there. What our greatest enemy is the inertia of our routines. We get trapped in a certain way. And that's why you need sometimes shock therapy. And I don't mean that literally. I mean to say something that shocks your system, something that causes you to change course. Now hopefully it's not something negative. Some wake-up call, something that shakes you out of a reverie. And realize that there's no such thing as a plateau in life. You're either going up or you're going down. Or as they say, either busy living or you're busy dying. And when the Torah says, here are the two paths, that's what it means. Are you choosing the path of the dead? Which means the inanimate material world is a dead place. And the fact that you see life as the Jewish say, the sages teach us, they say when you want to know if something's alive, you don't look how powerful it is at the moment. You look where it's going to be in a few years from now. There's a law in the Torah that talks about mikveh. The different impurities that we purify, and one of the purifying forces is a mikveh. Mayim, water. As the Rambam says, water is not purifying because it's not a bath or shower that cleanses us from physical dirt or grime. It's a spiritual thing. Mei hadas hatoyer. Water is symbolic of cleansing physically because it's symbolic of spiritual cleansing. Water is compared to knowledge, pure knowledge. The world that will be filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea. So there's different levels of purification. There's a thing called mayim, water. There's a thing called mayim chayim. You're being summoned. Mayim chayim. So there's certain impurities where all you need is a mikveh. A mikveh can be 40 saw, 40 cubits of water, still water, rainwater in a mikveh, which is used, common mikveh. Then there's a mayim chayim, which is connected as a live water. It's connected to a live spring. The famous mayim chayim mikveh is Arizal's mikveh, that cold mikveh up north in Svat. For certain impurities, especially the more severe ones, you need mayim chayim. It means literally live water, but it means a live spring, connected to a live spring that's running from underground. So the question the Mishnah asks is, what defines a live spring? How do you define it? What happens if it's a spring that's running today, but in a year from now it dries up? So how long does it have to run for it to be considered live? And it says 7 years. Why? Because if it runs less than 7 years, even now you can't call it alive because ultimately it's going to die. In other words, something that is just a matter of time is considered technically, qualitatively already on the dying path. So there's a statement that the Rabbeinu Bachai states, which can be very depressing, but look at this as like a comma, and the sentence isn't over until I give you the second half of it. Rabbeinu Bachai says, Tinuk mishaneled maskil yisyavish. A child, as soon as he's born, literally means to dry up, but begins to deteriorate, begins to age. When does the aging process begin? So many of us think it's when you start seeing it. No. If you didn't have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old, you wouldn't be a 25-year-old and then a 35-year-old. Remember, a 100-year-old person was once 5 years old. So it begins the moment you're born. The moment you're born, the body begins to break down. Except, obviously, at that point, it's not obvious in any possible way. But it's just a matter of time. So that can be a very depressing statement. It means that we're aging even when we don't know we're aging. But that's the body. When it comes to the soul, the statement is stated exact opposite, as I mentioned earlier. The older you get, the more vibrant your soul can become. Because the soul is not subject to the rules of time and space that the body is. So you have two paths before you. The path of life or the path of death. Death doesn't mean here literally the death in the sense of what we call death, the end of life. It means things that are dying. Our energy, our willpower, our desires, our dreams, our idealism. When we're younger, we're always more idealistic. What happens? So people say, well, I'm no longer naive. Now I'm more mature, I'm experienced. I realize those were just dreams. But the real dreamers, the people are the ones that never give up on those dreams. And even when they've seen disappointment and witnessed and experienced failure or seen the real world, quote unquote, they never give up because the soul is alive inside of them. And those are the people that their sparkle never dies, only gets stronger. And this is a choice that we all have. It's a choice we have every moment of our lives. And the interesting thing, it's not just a philosophical exercise. This, in Judaism, it gives us actual practical exercises. So next time you take a fruit, an apple or whatever food, and you make a blessing, like it says in this week's chapter, and allow it to awaken you to the awareness that there's energy inside this food. It's an exercise that helps us become sensitive to the energy around us. It's far deeper. And if you do this on an ongoing basis, because we eat more than once a day, And there are other blessings we make. There's a blessing you make when you see lightning, or when you hear thunder. There are blessings we make when the trees bloom. There's shechionos we make. There's constant blessings. All the blessings. There's actually a mitzvah that says that you should make 100 blessings a day. Why? God needs to be thanked 100 times a day? If he's so insecure, why only 100? So Maya is a full number. It's 10 times 10. It's the 10 spheres times 10. Is telling us that in every area of our lives, from the intellect, 3 intellectual, Chabad, and 7 emotional, Chagasnim, Chachma, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Chayid, Yisod, Malchus. These are the 10 building blocks that cover the entire spectrum of life. In every area, 10 times 10, find the sparks, find the energy. And what does the word bracha mean? Just like Hashem Elokim, what does Baruch Atah mean? Baruch means to draw. It comes from the word hamavrich esagefen, to graft, to channel energy. So a blessing is not just a nice thing you're thanking the one who gave you a gift. It's actually channeling into your life awareness of a higher sort, higher awareness. And when you do it properly, not by rote, you become a more sensitive human being to the spirit within everything around you and in yourself. And that will add sparkle to your life. And that will attract others as well. We have a singles crisis in New York, in case you haven't heard. It's nothing new. It's going back quite a number of years. Not when the Indians lived here. It's when the whites took over. So we live in a very advanced commercial world, United States of America, New York. Whether you hate or love New York, but one thing is for sure, all the options are here. New York never sleeps. You have every culture and everything. The place is alive. It's alive and kicking. And sometimes you drive down the streets. I've driven down the streets like on a Saturday night, and you see the young people jamming the clubs. Look into their eyes and tell me if it doesn't make you cry. With all the crowds, and New York has got plenty of them, there's such a deep loneliness that you see all the time. And you can't, I don't care what distractions we have. You can go into a stadium of 60,000 people and everyone's cheering for a team. Look into the eyes of the people. There's a lot of loneliness because the so-called external way of you join together, yes, it may be good for an hour or two, and a good distraction, a party. But the question is when you go back home alone, and we're all alone at the end of the day, what do you have? And what will it take for a person to be able to find their soulmate? Well, if you use the word soulmate already, is it even possible to find a soulmate if you haven't found your own soul? Or discovered it to some extent. When I say found it, I don't mean 100% found it. I mean to say something in touch. But we've become such a commodity-oriented society, and I don't say this because I'm some type of fire and brimstone preaching about the ills of our social ills. That's not at all where I'm going. It's just trying to identify, define something. Is that we've become commodity. We think in terms of acquiring things. Everything is about acquisitions, about commodities. We lose the appreciation of two key points. That the biggest, the most important things in life, primarily love, but the same thing is truth and God and soul, cannot be acquired and cannot come overnight. They're all part of a process. How many people respect process today and respect the concept of emerging realities? You plant a seed in the ground. Can you imagine it overnight suddenly turning into a tree? No, you wouldn't even expect that. I'm sure someone's going to come up with some type of hyper-steroids to make seeds grow faster. I don't know. But you get the idea. And the second thing, it emerges. You can't force it out of the ground. It has to grow out. You can plant it, you can water it, you can do 100 things to make it more conducive. But everything natural in this world works that way. Every child. A child that's just a newborn child suddenly become an adult? It doesn't work that way. So it can be one example of a real experience that is not emerging and does not require process. But then we have a whole other artificial reality. We build machines. And there, yes, we press a button. We're so not in touch with the rhythms. You want tomatoes or cherries or any fruit, you don't need to wait for anything. You can go. They have it 24/7, all seasons. Once upon a time, when you lived on a farm, you knew very well, in this season you have this fruit, this season you don't have it, and that's that. So I'm not taking away from the advancements of our time that we have such access. You press a button, literally, and you get a delivery. With online today, we know that anything. So the gifts of that are obvious. But what it does is it tends to create a false reality. A false reality that we think that things can just be acquired. And things don't take a process. And then we apply that to love and to relationships and to everything else. We want it the same way. Now, no one's going to say it's exactly the same thing. You go online, jaded, you press a button, and you're suddenly married. You know? But in a strange way, the way our mindsets work, we expect something similar. So then we need a little more work. But it's still the same idea. We think in terms of control. We think in terms of not wanting to be vulnerable. All the things that are real, especially when it comes to love, have to do with the sparkle and the soul within. Now you'll say, well, why are there marriages and people getting married and falling in love and it doesn't seem there's anything soulful going on? So again, number one is, how do you know there's nothing soulful going on? Soulful doesn't necessarily mean religious. Soulful means maybe people connect. Love can bring out the soul in people. That's number one. And number two, how do you know it's working? The other side is, I started with the positive. What do we know what's going on in people's lives? And how long will it last? How could something last if it's being defined by temporary and impermanent forces? How long will something really last? So the formula that Jews always knew from the beginning, I know it might sound strange to you, but train a child from young age to make blessings on food, guarantee you they'll find love easier in their lives. Say, what's the connection? The connection is sensitivity to forces within that are invisible. It's sensitivity to energy as opposed to matter. That's what it comes down to. It's not automatic, obviously. You can train someone in blessings, you can train them to be sensitive, not everything happens. It's not as I said, it's not pressing a button. But you want to heighten the odds or lower the odds, however it works, whatever it is. You get that. You want to maximize the possibilities. You get a person to be more sensitive to energy and soul. Guaranteed they'll be more sensitive and more easier to find someone to love and be loved. It's hard to love someone that's just all about themselves. I know we'd like to have it both ways, meaning I love myself, and that person should also love me as much as I love myself. But are you willing to give as much as you take? Like the guy that goes on a date with a woman and speaks 2 hours about himself, and then he says, okay, enough about me. Now what do you think about me? And if you ask him later, you say, why don't you give equal? He says, I gave her. She says, I asked her, So we would like to have it both. We'd like to be, it's P, and I wish I could find someone that understands and appreciates me as much as I appreciate myself. And that's that. Now, of course, we're a little wiser than that. We realize we have to give something. So we give commensurate to how much we want to take or receive. In other words, it's always with some caveat. Why? Because that's the way we live in this world. We've been even trained. It's one of the things they tell us. You don't get anything for nothing. You want something, you got to give something. Someone else wants something from you. What are they giving me in return? That's a mindset, and actually maybe appropriate when it comes to negotiations in business and in dealing with the daily business of our lives. But when it comes to things like truth, you also say the same thing. You know what? Tell me how much you give me, and then I'll tell you how much I'll give you. Either it's true or it's not true. And with God and with love. So our love has become jaded and defined by this type of acquisition and what's the opposite of process? Acquisition, and instead of acquiring, instead of emerging, respecting the process, we think in terms of How can we hold on to? How can we hoard? How can we? Because the material world is defined by time and space, by what you have. And the spiritual world is defined by what you give. It's not defined by parameters of how big something is, how much of it you have. It doesn't work that way. As a matter of fact, some will say, and this is an expression from Ayin Beis, he says, the container for the deepest truth of the essence is having no container at all. That's what he says. You want to have the truths, the deepest truths of life, get yourself out of the way. It's the exact opposite thinking that anything that this material world works by. When we go out to get a job, when we go out to find something we need or want, our attitude is, you got to be aggressive. You're not going to go be a go-getter. It's not going to come your way. And when it comes to the truths of life, especially love and relationships, it's the more you get yourself out of the way, the more you'll get in return. Now try that out. If you've tried everything and it's not worked, maybe that's the final frontier. You say, 1 second, but if I get myself out of the way, I need to know if I like this person. I need to know if it serves me. Well, I'm sure you can guess the answer to that. Obviously, this doesn't mean obliterating yourself, annihilating yourself. It means that it doesn't begin and end with your needs. It's not like you start with a list of needs. And the younger we are, by the way, the easier it is for us to do that. Now, everyone here are very young people, so I'm not in any way insulting anyone. But for those that are out there that are a little older, as you get older, as your arteries harden, also your attitudes harden. You have your way of doing it. Usually 20-year-olds or 25-year-olds have not yet, let's put it this way, it's not yet set in stone whether they're going to squeeze the toothpaste from the middle of the tube or from the bottom of the tube. To use a mild example. Obviously, there are a little more serious examples than that, but you get the idea. They also don't usually have bank accounts and careers and other things that are set in stone and set in motion. As we get older, these things harden. But what's hardening? Your material life is hardening. And your soul is being pushed out in the process. Or let's put it this way, concealed in the process. The only way to change that is to change the course of your life, which is a soulful way of thinking. And there are many, many ways to do that. It starts with a mindset, but it also comes down to actions. As I said, the blessings. Moitzi pi Hashem. To look for the sparks, the divine in everything. And when you begin to change the course, it doesn't have to be, as I said, a complete extreme change, but it's a change of the direction that you're going. You're going this way, then you're going into the aging and dying process. Or you're going into the spirit way, then you're going into the youthful, dynamic, the spark and the sparkle. So as we continue the 7 weeks of consolation or comfort, following Tisha B'Av, the saddest day in the Jewish calendar, and the following 7 weeks, we're now in the second of those 7 weeks. So each one of them is another step toward comforting ourselves. And the definition of that comfort is not just feeling comfortable, like as in someone not having pressure. It means getting in touch with the things that really bring you the deepest comfort of all. And that is making sense and knowing that while you're here right now, in this time and in this space, you're needed. And you have something to contribute. And the world and others and everything in the cosmic level and the practical level is waiting for you to live up to your calling, for your soul to express itself. When a person knows that and is fully aware of that on a daily basis, it adds a lot of sparkle to your life. Because knowing that you're here for this time right now, in this time, in this place, and no one can do what you have to accomplish, tell me what can be more satisfying than to know that. I challenge anyone to give me something that's more satisfying than that. And I'm not talking about satisfaction, again, instant gratification that makes you feel good. I'm talking about something that has lasting value. To know that what you have to contribute, and everybody's waiting for you to express that, that is the essence of what the spark of a human being and of your soul is about. But we live in a world where we have to satisfy others' expectations, real or fabricated or imagined, and we have to satisfy all kinds of other needs, and so on. And I'm not suggesting we drop that all, but worshiping it all and seeing it as the beginning and end of your life, that's our undoing. So, in this week of Akev, when we read this chapter, and it's the third of these 7 weeks, second of the 7 weeks of comfort, we have the opportunity to go back into the engineering room, and rewire our priorities. And when we do that, you have a new beginning right now and right here. It's not just waiting for some type of epiphany or some type of revelation. Every moment allows you that opportunity. It just takes one thing, a decision to change course. Decision, you're swimming this way, you're going to swim in a different direction. And the good news is that we have each other. We have the ability and the opportunity to reach to each other and give each other strength. So even though sometimes one of us may be a little weaker, someone else can complement. It's like a marathon, a relay team, where each one carries the baton to a certain point, but collectively we have the ability to achieve more than the sum of the parts. So, with that being said, hopefully all of us sitting here in this room can create that type of synergy where we empower each other. And please see me and the Meaningful Life Center and all of us as a resource, as a friend, as we intersect in our soul's journey. And reach out to people who you feel you trust and people you can talk to, because these are the people that can help you reconnect to that sparkle. Meet people who have the sparkle in their eyes and the spark and energy, and that is a great first step to go in that direction. Hang around with such people. The question is whether they want to hang around with you is another story. But if you demonstrate some type of effort and interest in that direction, guaranteed they will. Because everybody's got that soul and spark. And people who have the sparkle are not really easily dissuaded. They're people who know how to help other people also ignite. So think of it that way. I often say this when you meet people. I don't know if any of your friends will tell you that when they're with you, do they feel drained or they feel energized? Are you a person that ignites others or a person that extinguishes others? Let's put it that way. I know it sounds like very stark options, but what's the third option? I'm not really sure. And you can find the people that ignite you, and that's the people you want to hang around with. So that's a practical way, besides everything else I've said, to help things going. So it's like flames. Each flame can light another flame without the first one being diminished. And when flames meet, they join together and they become stronger, to the point you can't even distinguish between where one flame begins and another one ends. And at the same time maintain our individuality. So that's a pretty good image, I think. A poetic image. A bunch of individual, unique flames that know how to join, but also maintain their own individual contribution. Many indispensable musical notes in one large composition. So it's an honor for me to jam with you and play some music. And hopefully we can do this for many healthy years. And hopefully, more importantly, there's a big world out there, and each of us have our sphere of influence. So it's about also bringing and playing music with the groups that you connect with, individuals and so on. And God should bless you all and bless us all with this, with the fortitude, and to bring out that spark and sparkle, and guarantee that your life and this will open up channels of blessings into your life. That's how it is. Positive energy breeds positive energy. I'm not going to tell you what the converse is. You can figure that out on your own. So it's an honor and pleasure to speak to all of you. And let me just make an announcement. Philip, you're giving your class? So Philip is the one sitting back there, the cute Popeye looking guy, right? Yeah, there you go. That's tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. So Philip was a very beautiful class, personal, intimate class, and we could take this to the next level, the igniting of the sparks, right? And we will be here next Wednesday. And those of you that haven't met before, please, before you go, please say hello. And as well, if you haven't left your email address, it would be good to stay in touch. especially if we have announcements, and in general I send out a weekly email and other stuff, so it would be great if you could leave your email address as well. And everyone have a very cool week, and all cool in many ways, and warm week as well, warm spiritually. I'll also announce that, right, next week, when is Rosh Chodesh? 2 weeks, right? Yeah. No, in 10 days. So there's the book 60 Days is available here. I think it's on a special sale, which is a 60-day workbook that begins in 10 days, that goes through the whole high holiday season. So we have 60 days here. 60 days for the camera. Okay. And it's been great speaking to you. Thank you so much.